right. Well, to be prompt, because we respect your time, I think we'll get started. And I did want to go through just a couple of housekeeping notes. So if we haven't met yet, or if we have met, it's nice to see some friendly names. My name's Joe. I'm the head of marketing for Playbypoint. And this is Ben Dankiw, who is joining us today. He is a former colleague of mine, someone I deeply respect in the industry, and someone who's managed a wide variety of paid campaigns and is a fractional marketer as well. A couple of housekeeping notes, just so that everyone's clear. We've obviously muted everybody on the other side of the line, just to keep things moving quickly and quietly. I will ask that if you have any questions or you want to drop in a note, we are using the chat, so don't be shy. Some folks may already be running a paid media strategy and have questions around what they're trying to accomplish. You may be new to this. Either way, no question is a dumb question, and we welcome them all. So I'll ask you to just drop those into the chat, and we'll collect everything at the end and answer as many as we can with any remaining time. And then anything else, we will gather and respond as part of the follow-up. Additionally, from a housekeeping perspective, this is a recorded session. So if at any point in time you have to jump, I know life is busy, you've got businesses to run, you've got teams, probably relying on you. So feel free to, take leave if you need to go. We'll be sending out the full recording afterwards, in addition to some tools, both on the Playbypoint side and anything that might be useful that comes out of this conversation to make sure that you've got something solid to walk away with. And yeah, that's the housekeeping piece. And Ben, if you want to move forward, I'll just quickly talk about Playbypoint. So if you are not currently working with Playbypoint, we are an all-in-one club management platform. We operate in 35 countries around the globe. We have over 1,000 partners, and that is across pickleball, padel, tennis, golf simulators. Our business is primarily built for racket sports, but we do power a number of other sports businesses. At this point, we have millions of players around the globe, and we're moving some heavy volume in terms of all of the transactional volume we're processing. Get you to, yeah, perfect. And then, this is kind of I love this slide. A lot of our clubs are here. And if you're not on the slide, it's not because it was intentional. We appreciate you. We appreciate your partnership, but we do power a number of some of the most trusted and ambitious brands in the space. And this is just a great slide illustrating some of our very wonderful partners.
There's some great names on here.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. Yeah. I already touched on this, but we are certainly a purpose-built racket sports solution for businesses, but we also can support golf simulators, which is a growing segment of our business, badminton, fitness, swimming. There's kind of no limitation to what we do in this space. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to learn more about Playbypoint if you haven't spoken with our team. Obviously, we'll share some information out afterwards, and we'd love to chat. Next. Okay, great. Just really quickly, I kind of want to talk a little bit about why this matters right now. Racket sports are continuing to boom. Pickleball is growing. Padel is continuing to proliferate across the world and the US. It's a very new sport to the US. So we all have a responsibility of educating players and markets about what that sport is and why it's so special. Tennis obviously is starting to see some continued and amazing participation. I also am a tennis player, so rah tennis. And we're seeing a ton of clubs opening, right? So more clubs opening means more competition for the same local players. And that means that you have a pretty wide window right now in terms of accessing a player base, depending on where you're located. A lot of your competitors in market probably aren't running ads at all. They're thinking about organic strategy. So our goal with this session today is to help you understand the unit economics of how this works, building a simple funnel framework so that you can understand how Meta generates demand, how Google captures it, and how to think about creative strategy. Most importantly, with webinars, it's important to walk away with something that's very actionable. So we'll make sure that when we follow up, you've got an action plan so you can start as early as this week with your phone. All right, Ben, I will kick it off to you and let's get into it.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. So quickly, just a little bit of background on myself. Thanks for the quick intro, Joe. So I've been in performance marketing for about 15 years now. I'm a mathematician originally who turned to marketing after I realized what was I going to do with a math degree. And I turned that to generating paid media campaigns. So I've been doing this for a long time. Originally, I was really in Google and Meta. I started as a Google specialist and worked my way up to running an agency. I've managed over 100 million ad spend. So I've managed the budgets of $5-10 million a year, but I've also managed budgets of $500 to $1,000 a month. So I'm coming to you with a lot of what I've learned over the years from managing small to large. So this is really catered around of course, the racket sports world, but there'll be lessons in here that I've learned from running multi-million-dollar campaigns as well. So just going over some of the areas, we're going to go talk about the opportunity in front of you as club owners and the marketing leaders of your clubs, what to focus on before the launch. We'll stress that one when we get there. How to build a funnel itself. Then we're going to go into a little bit of the specifics of Meta versus the specifics of Google and how to leverage these two platforms. And then finally, like Joe mentioned, we're going to go into your action plan. All right, so first off, just why paid ads? Why we talk about it right now? The sports and fitness industry has some of the lowest CPCs across. Like I work on many different verticals and industries, and you're dealing with like a $3 CPC on Google, typically under. You should be in that kind of $1 to $2 range typically, but you're definitely under $3. And in Meta, you're focusing on like there's a CPC of about $1 out there. So you can drive an interested person there for about $1.
Just a quick TLDR, Ben, can you do us a favor and not assume that everyone knows what CPC means on the call?
Great call. Great call. So I'm talking about cost per click. So how much does it cost for you to send one interested person to your website? So $1 for Meta. So these are actually pretty affordable cost per clicks versus other platforms and in other industries. So let's jump into how we can take advantage of that. So before you spend $1, and I will say this is potentially the most important takeaway from this session, is what you as marketers need to realize before even launching campaigns. I see this like time and time again. Anyone can create a Google ad campaign. I could do it for you in 10 minutes. Jump in there, create an ad, target your local area, and launch the ad. Anyone can create a Meta ad. Meta is a little bit more finicky, but at the end of the day, you could probably get one launched today where you launch your first ad. Now, before you do that, and before you start spending money, this is really where you can determine if you're going to be successful or not. Because often when you see programs that aren't successful, it's because they've burned through budget before they've found something that works. So taking the time to know your numbers and get ahead and what the fundamentals are before is so essential for success. So I'm going to go over what some of those fundamentals are. So the first thing is like a mindset. It's a framework. So what is paid ads? What is paid media for? How do you leverage Google ads and Meta ads? It's here to drive pipeline and drive growth, not necessarily profitability up front. It's there to send interested people to your website who can buy your product and then who you can turn into lifetime customers. It creates demand. It captures demand and it drives revenue. It's predictable. You can scale it up or down. It's a channel that you can measure like to every small detail of all these different acronyms, which I'll explain to you later. But it's a predictable channel where you can say month after month, I'm spending this much money, I'm driving this many people to my website, and I'm also getting this many customers. But what it's not a replacement for a strong product. Even if you have the best cost per lead and you have the top performance marketer running your ads and they're getting you, a lead for $10 and you're like, wow, a lead for $10. That's great. I could certainly sign up someone who comes to my court for $10 for something long term. If you don't have a good product, and if you don't have good customer service, your courts aren't in good maintenance, if you're not a good, strong product, you're not going to turn that into long-term profitability. Same thing for retention strategies. If you don't have a CRM in place, if you're not using Playbypoint's marketing functionality so that you can actually speak to your customers and speak to them to get them to come to that next level and retain them as a client, then you could potentially waste that upfront investment that you spent to get them into your funnel. And finally, it's not a channel that profits standalone. Typically, the best strategies are a combination, right? Like you'll have your ad strategy, you'll have your organic strategy, you'll have your email strategy. There's all sorts of these that work really well together. You can have a focus of paid media as the core and crux of your advertising, of your growth strategy, I should say. But at the end of the day, if you're not using email and SMS and other features that can allow you to speak to your customers, then you're not getting the max value. And it's really important I have a little quote here on the bottom. It's not, I need to have a 3-to-1 ROAS or return on ad spend. So for every dollar, I don't need to make $3 on today's sale. That's really what I'm referencing. But can I create a customer opportunity above break even? So I'm not spending more money than I'm getting on that initial sale, and then upsell them to become a lifetime customer. And that LTV or lifetime customer value is where you will see the biggest gains from your paid media investment. So just some quick numbers here for some of the club sports here. Imagining, and any of these numbers could change on your court or in your specific company, of course, but just using numbers for an example, $120 average membership value. If you can retain them for at least an average of 10 months, let's say, for example, that means you're generating a lifetime value and a customer revenue of $1,200. So if you are getting a cost per acquisition or a cost per sign up of $50 to $100, then you could face either a 10 to 20 times your return on investment. So for every $100, you're generating $1,200. That's a formula that we can all get behind, but it does mean you need to focus on all these core areas. And of course, the upfront thing we got to figure out is how can we drive those leads at under $100. So there are stages along the way that we'll get to where you evaluate success. But at the end of the day, this is like the shining beacon of spend 100, make 1,200. That's a very simple formula we can all get behind. So first thing that brands get wrong, I should say, is you try to target everybody with your ads. And if you target everybody, you don't target anybody. So as you can tell when you're in your feed, if you don't resonate with an ad, if you're on Meta and you don't resonate, you skip right by it. And that's the same for any of the ads that we're creating. You want to make sure you're thinking about who's the customer profile, the ICP, the customer profile that you're targeting, and what do they care about? What are their desires? What are their pain points? What are they struggling with in regards to your product itself? And how can you reach them? So it's really important for you to understand, maybe for example, at your club, you have 80% of your members are actually 50 plus. And for whatever reason, this is who you speak to. Well, you're going to want to try your first ad set and try your first ads targeting that user base and say, okay, I'm targeting people who are, newly retired, 55 to 70. They're looking for social activity. They're looking for health, community, and wellness. That's who I'm going to speak to. And you can then create a message that resonates with them. If you send that same ad to parents who are 35 and trying to think about ways to get their young kids into camps, it's not going to resonate. I know it's obvious when I say it like that, but at the end of the day, it's really important for you, and this is an exercise you can go through to say, okay, who are my customers? Bucket them. And you don't have to go into crazy detail about this, but you could create 3 to 5 different profiles and then say, okay, who do I know that I'm already doing well with? Who comes to my court today? You can see your customer list. You can see on the court what kind of people are there, and cater your first message to something that you think will be successful. I often say, win your winners first. So for example, if you have tons of, like I mentioned earlier, seniors who come to your court and they tell their friends, and every time a senior comes, they rave to you how amazing this experience is and they love the community and XYZ. Maybe when you launch your first set of ads, don't go out there and try to get that pickleball league champion to get someone to sign up for an advanced level series, and really cater it to where you can win your winners is where I'm going for. Okay, so you have your numbers kind of set. You have your who do I want to speak to and how do I want to speak to them? And then you have the tracking. So capture every lead, track every dollar. This is really important. From a CRM perspective, Playbypoint is a great tool for this. You can have conversion journey reports. You can look at your actual customer list. You can see how much revenue they're generating, all sorts of different areas where you can explore this. But the most important part is having a CRM that is tracking your customers. The next point, tracking itself, this is more ad specific I'm speaking towards. So that's actually having your Meta Pixel installed. There's a very simple tag installation you can do for installing it through either Google Tag Manager or directly onto your website. Same thing with GA. So Meta, GA4, and Google Ads are the 3 main pixels you want to make sure today, you could go do that pretty quickly, you're already capturing this, because that means you can then retarget to these audience. That means you can start profiling who comes to your website. These are data points that you need that will help you be more efficient with your ad spend. And then finally, a follow-up sequence. So you need to make sure you have them going in your CRM. You need to make sure you're tracking who's converting, who's coming to your site. And then finally, if you're getting a lead, to make sure you're turning that investment into a long-term revenue generator, you need to make sure you are doing SMS follow-ups, email follow-ups, those kind of things. This is actually a pretty big standalone thing that I call it speed to lead. I don't actually have the top of my head the numbers, but the percentage of conversion rate, if you speak to a lead within the first 5 minutes of them submitting that form, is something like a 50% improvement. It's a ridiculous improvement. So if you're not setting up an email where you're saying, hey, thanks for joining or signing up for our offer, thanks for booking your first session, question, whatever it is, and saying, here's all the things you need to know about our courts and memberships. I'm here. My name is Ben, and I'm your rep at this place. You can reach out to me if you have any questions at all, anything like that. It doesn't have to be some complex system, but having a follow-up sequence, super important. Okay, so let's build your lead gen funnel. This is the distribution of how you're going to spend your budget across the ad platforms. I'm going to keep this pretty much to Meta and Google. There's lots of other ad platforms out there, but these are two of the essential ones that make a lot of sense for courts. So how do we leverage these different platforms? First of all, you might be speaking to audiences who don't know yet that they want to play pickleball or want to play padel or whatever kind of racket sport they're playing. The first element is, how do you get in front of them? And Meta is, it's a very, very profitable social media platform. If you have any of the stocks or you follow them over the last 15 years, one thing they know how to do is they know how to find customers. They know how to interrupt someone's browsing and get them to take action. Their algorithm is built to find customers. So using Meta to get in front of people who could turn into customers is typically your first step. Then there's the consideration. So these people are thinking about paddle, thinking about pickle, trying to book a court, trying to find which membership is right for them, evaluating different clubs. There's all sorts of different ways that they could be considering this. This is where typically it's a combination of retargeting and Google. People will search, nowadays they'll also search on ChatGPT, but they don't have ChatGPT ads quite yet. So we're going to stay with Google, but they'll be searching and they'll be looking for something very specific. This is where you're capturing demand. It's a very different element from generating demand. This is where someone is looking for something and you're here to offer them something to convert them. And that is where it comes to the next part, conversion. This is where you have them on your landing page. This is where you're converting them with an offer. You're providing value to try out a new product. You have to remember that for the most part, they probably either haven't heard about your brand, or maybe if you have a big brand and they haven't been to your facility yet. So at the end of the day, you're trying to convince them to spend money with you. And this is where you are giving them some sort of value. And then finally, the retention is this is a combination of all sorts of marketing channels, not just paid media, but that is making sure that person who comes to your court for that first day becomes a member, and that membership lasts X months and you get that return on your investment. So this is like the high level funnel to always keep in your mind. Use Meta to generate awareness, use Google and retargeting to capture consideration and turn them into potential, I'd say, high prospects. Use your landing pages and your offers and your website to turn them into a lead, and then turn that lead into a lifetime customer to make sure that you're getting the right return on your investment. All right, let me just jump to the next one here. All right, so how do you measure success? So measuring your funnel checkpoints. I'm going to simplify it to 3 checkpoints that are key in any advertiser or marketer's playbook. There's one, before the click. So before they've come to your website, what's happening? This is typically an evaluation of the performance of your ad. Are your ads effective? Are your offers effective? Are people interested in what you're showing them? If you don't have a click-through rate, that's positive. And I would say like a generic benchmark good click-through rate for anyone here is about 2%. This can vary different by, someone selling an engagement ring versus someone selling, shoes. They can be very different. But at the end of the day, 2% is a pretty good benchmark you could leverage for your clubs. So this tells you, are my ads working? And if your ads aren't working, then the rest is a problem to solve later. Because if you can't get people to your website, to your landing page, then that's your first problem. So that's the first checkpoint. Are my ads working? And that's evaluated through click-through rate, CTR. The next checkpoint is during the click. Okay, they liked my ad. I showed them something on Meta. They've come to my landing page. What are they doing as a next step? Are they submitting a form? Are they calling? Are they signing up? Are they purchasing? What's happening during the click? And this is typically evaluated on success by conversion rate. So what's a good conversion rate benchmark? This differs by your offer. So for example, if you're a club who's offering a free membership, a free trial, or a free first court booking, that might convert higher than someone, for example, selling 20% off your annual membership, as an example. So for a free or like really high value offer, you would want to be converting in about the 10 to 20% range. That's like a typical benchmark. You're giving away something. Yes, you're going to be profiting on the back end, trying to upsell them to come to your court, but you're giving away something. There's a higher conversion rate versus A typical benchmark could be anywhere between 2 to 5% for a more what we call a high ticket offer. So that's the second checkpoint. The third checkpoint is after the click. This is making sure you get the lifetime value. So once they have submitted their form and once they have signed up for your offer or whatever the offer is you're running, how are you turning that person into a lifetime client? That is the third stage. So from there, you're evaluating to make sure this is your on-court team. This is making sure you have the right email sequences. There's lots of elements here. All right, offers that convert. So let's talk about offers. There's a variety of different types of offers. And I've even seen some really specific, targeted offers. But your offer is your different differentiator. And it doesn't always have to be free. It doesn't always have to be a percentage off. It doesn't have to be monetary. An offer could be value driven. Most of the time, you are giving some value to make sure that they are coming in, like a free intro lesson and tour. I can go through each one of these kind of quickly. But just to kind of give you some examples, a free trial, that's all. It's very simple, lowest barrier to entry, open play or intro session. This gets someone onto your court just to make sure they like your courts. First month, 50% off. It drives a little bit more commitment. And can be convertible to a full membership. So this might be when you are building out those customer profiles. This might be better for someone who's more of an intermediate or advanced player. A free intro lesson, again, back to the beginners, but a very high touch experience. You obviously need to have some sort of coaching program available where you can bring them in. Oftentimes, you don't have to overthink the delivery of this, right? Like maybe you have someone on site who is ready for when someone comes for a free intro, or maybe you have a pre-booked session and all these different elements to it, right? A walkthrough and all that. Don't need to overthink too much of the specifics. A seasonal program launch, of course, if you have spring leads, summer camps, any sort of urgency to get signed up for something that they could desire, like make sure you're signed up by this date, or you might not have a place. That not only is something exciting of an offer, but also it is a time-bound offer. So it has that urgency level. And then finally, another interesting one is like bring a friend for free. So maybe, for example, someone is worried about who will I play with? I don't have any friends who are signed up at this court with me. This is where you could bring a friend for free. And you could leverage tools like Game Match where you can get matched as well. I'll go back one thing. This is kind of interesting. So use paid media to test your offers. Kind of like a pro tip next level is don't just test your offers. You could test your pricing. Like offering a intro membership for $79 versus $99. Maybe it is that's enough of a differentiator where you convert 20% more people. And you're like, okay, can I now turn that $79 membership into a lucrative long-term deal? You have to know your numbers, which comes back to that before you launch thing. But at the end of the day, don't just test offers. You can test pricing. You can test anything with ads because you're typically doing it on a standalone page. It doesn't mean you have to update your entire website to change your pricing for anyone who is potentially at your club. It can be isolated and tested. Okay, so let's go into meta ads quickly here. So different targeting for meta ads. You have interest-based. This is where you're targeting someone who likes tennis, pickleball. This is really best for starting out. It's for prospecting, just finding interest. Now, one thing I want to kind of separate here is think about your niche versus you would say in marketing terms, your TAM, but your target addressable market versus your niche market of who wants to use your product. So if someone is interested in tennis, pickleball, and padel, and you have a racket club, that is someone that you definitely want to be targeting. At the end of the day, though, there's broader audiences that you can target. This platform is changing significantly to actually reward broadening targeting on a efficiency level. What that means, though, is that you need to change your messaging. So if you're targeting people who like tennis, pickleball, and padel, you can speak to them because they like those things. But if you're targeting someone who likes fitness, you're going to want to make your messaging around a fitness goal, a way to stay fit in the summertime, an emerging way where joggers are finding they fall in love with this, or like XYZ. There's lots of different types of language you could find, but you're targeting it differently. Going on to the next one, lookalikes. So what this is, it's profiling who purchases your product today and who comes to your website and converts into a lead. And then it says, all right, Meta, go out there and find more of these. You're going to give them this lookalike audience. It's inside Meta's platform. You generate these lookalikes. But to do that, they have to know what your audience is. So that's where Playbypoint's like CRM and like your whole email list, you can upload that directly into Meta, for example. You can do the same thing for Google. And you can say, profile what my lookalike audience is and let's target those. So that's a really successful way for taking it to the next level. Retargeting, basically, if they come to your website and they don't convert, let's send them another ad. Most people take multiple touch points to make a decision. Unless you have a really strong offer, then they're usually in some sort of consideration phase. And finally, local radius. So something to keep in mind for targeting on local radius. Think about your court's radius of who you want to own versus who is nice to have. You got to be realistic here, right? And you're going to see these in the numbers, but it's not likely someone's going to drive over an hour to come to your court. So one, you do want to make sure you have a realistic radius. There's also an own versus compete. So for example, if it's within a 5 mile radius, then there's a good chance you want to be owning that. Going to the courts for a 5 mile drive is nothing. Versus 20 to 50 miles might be a little bit wider on the range. You're going to have your own versus compete in terms of radiuses.
Sorry, I just want to quickly jump in.
Yeah.
There's one thing I think that is also important to talk about. Obviously, we're diving into paid media strategy today, but this also ties back to your organic and SEO strategy too, right? So if you're looking at things like targeting at a local radius, which is very important because you have a physical location, you also need to be making sure that your Google reviews are up to date. So when people are showrooming around trying to understand, is this a place that's going to be great for me? You've got that side of the equation taken care of too. Because what will often happen is someone will tap on an ad, say, okay, this looks good. Theoretically, I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to see what other people have to say about me. So if you're using a paid media strategy, also make sure that you're investing in like very simple sort of SEO tactics and getting reviews and making sure that you're building trust and credibility alongside this plan.
100%. You don't want to lose the sale because of when they do that Google and they see that lack of reviews, that could hurt your investment into the paid side. All right, so meta creative that works. I put 4 starting points here. There's like ton. We do a whole webinar on meta creative, but it's one of your first levers, right? So quick little note, video does typically outperform static. I've seen static beat video though, so it's not like it's an always thing. But a couple things that are really easy to take a look at. First of all, a facility tour video. Don't think overproduced. People like authentic. They like real. They like funny. They like to feel like they're seeing the club. They're seeing the owner. They're seeing someone who's on site. You can create overly produced, and those can operate great, but don't think you have to. You could take your iPhone and walk around your club and speak to it directly like that. Member testimonials, this is a great one. Now, I'm going to reference back to that whole customer profile. If, for example, you are going after parents who are trying to sign their kids up for camp, this would be a great time for you to think of when you're running those camps. Let's get some member testimonials, film those, not only put them on your website, but also you can turn these into great endorsement ads. And it's a trust factor, right? Like people will they don't buy from you until they trust you. So it's like putting that trust factor directly into your ad and showing them it kind of helps them visualize what they could be experiencing. Program promos, these are always great. Just highlighting specific programs, giving a certain pricing, showing how to get started quickly on an intro offer. And then finally, seasonal offers. This could be like, New Year's, spring, summer, anything that could actually give us a reason to market to them basically. But lots of different offers you can start there. I've included these. They're basically just some do's and don'ts on meta creative. This will be in your takeaway, so I won't go through each of them. But you do have to create ads that resonate on meta. So for example, cutting to new footage every 2 to 3 seconds. That kind of stuff can be important on an ad because you are pacing. It's different than someone who's signed up to watch a video. They've just been served a video and you have to keep them engaged. So this is just a good little do's and don'ts you can take away from.
I'm going to just very quickly jump in here too.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. One of the things that everybody has going for them too is that a lot of the clubs or the facilities or the experience are really interesting visually. So it's such a great opportunity, particularly in the racket sports space, to feature the courts, if you have a wellness component to your facility, your staff, like there's so many different angles to think about creatively that showcase the brand and build trust. So I think think about this as like, how can I do this from a visually compelling way that tells the story, but also is really interesting to look at?
Absolutely. And actually, it's a good point. When you're building a meta ad, there's typically a few different components to it. There's the hook. There is the body, and then there's the call to action. That's a kind of a simple way to do it. But there's agitation. Like, is there a problem that they're trying to solve? They can't find the court near them. They don't have a a league they can play with, etc. There's agitation is kind of something that comes in meta. But basically, there's that hook where you need to capture their attention. There's the body where you are explaining your service, demonstrating your product, showing the like what really are how you meet their needs and their desires. And then finally, there's the call to action. So important to break that down. Some meta creative examples here. Just on this, on the left side here is an example. This is from someone on Instagram, Picklepreneur. He helps, I don't know what he does, but he shows that you could create an ad quite simply from your phone. And he does things like he has a paddle in his video so that it's like almost like a visual cue to think about pickleball. He wears a bright headband. These are things that stand out visually to people and capture attention. So there's things that you can do for your club too. Branded swag, having a paddle, showing a pickleball swing to start out. Those are kind of like hooks that you could focus in on. We'll share some example creative on the follow-up email, but here's an example shot from an actual facility tour of like the framing that was leveraged. And the next one here, we are actually highlighting very clearly a branded name. Like this is for a chiropractor ad or something like that. But what they're doing is they're naming their actual program and saying it's the Happy Back Challenge. Well, it could be your 21-day pickleball intro challenge. I'm not sure. That's not very creative, but there could be a fun name you could leverage where you're actually standing out from your competitors because you're creating a branded aspect to it. And then finally, this last ad, which is a static ad, just very clearly says, like, learn to play. It tells you exactly what you're going to do. Hey, you don't know how to play yet? Learn to play pickleball or learn to play paddle. Could be anything like that, right? Okay, now let's go over Google. So Google, this is where you're bidding on people's what they search for. So there are different types of campaigns. A search campaign is pickleball near me, book a tennis court in a city. Typically, they're either going to search by the product or by the product plus the location. Very similar to the SEO world. But show up for these high intent keywords and make sure you're bringing them to offer pages. A lot of times people will bid on these terms like pickleball near me, and they'll just send them to a facility booking page or something like that, like something very general. You're still trying to convince them to become a customer. So you still need to think about trust. This is where standalone landing pages are really helpful. So high intent. And then there's something called Performance Max. This is a combination of all sorts of channels, video, banners, search ads. It is like Google's AI or machine learning algorithm for finding customers, similar to what Meta does. Typically some combination of search and PMax or search and YouTube. You're going to do a combination typically. A very simple one to start with is a combination of search and PMax. And what this does is actually they place ads in places where you just say, here's my assets, here's like 5 images, here's 5 headlines, go find me customers. So a little bit more complex, but just as beneficial. All right, just a sample ad like Joe alluded to earlier. You got that 4.8 stars. You could have this directly in your Google ad. Make sure you build headlines. So Google does something called responsive ads where actually you don't even choose the entire ad layout. You just put 5 headlines and it picks the best combo. On the left here is an example of like a display ad where it takes this image and then it has a headline, 6 essential pickleball shots, and then the description's a little bit longer. Pretty key that it has an offer there. Going to your landing page, and sorry I'm going a little fast, but I want to make sure we get to everything. I'll take some questions at the end on that. But going to your landing page, you want to make sure your landing page headline matches your ad. So if you offer a free session, make sure your landing page talks about a free session. Sounds obvious, but it's really important. Social proof, things that might help them convert, a clear offer, and one call to action. So that one call to action is don't try to get them to do 5 different things. They are a low attention span point. When you hit an ad, your attention span is like, I want to get this thing done. So give them one clear-cut thing to do. Sign up, call now. Doesn't matter what it is necessarily, but make sure it's one clear-cut thing. And make sure it's mobile optimized because 80% of your traffic is going to be coming on their phone. Make sure they're seeing it properly on their phone. Don't send to your homepage. So here's some landing page examples, and we'll send some play-by-point examples specifically where these are how other clubs are doing this. But you'll notice some key callouts here is your first game is on us. Very clear what the offer is. No pressure, just show up and play. They make sure they speak to the problem. Don't be worried. Like if you're nervous or we're not trying to sell you too much, just show up and play and then sell them based on your product. And on the right here, is another one where it's play more with one simple monthly rate. It's a very clear-cut offer, just $85 a month, no long-term commitment, very clear messaging. You'll notice all of these headlines are skimmable. There's not a ton of text on there. They're very easy to skim, read, and say yes or no. There's like a 2 to 5 second rule where if you don't know what this page is about in 5 seconds, you're probably just going to bounce. So be careful there. Little pro tip, if you can add this onto your landing pages, you can put a little quiz qualifier. This might actually allow you to qualify your leads and say, okay, how many years have you been playing pickleball? Now, when you ask people questions that they are engaged with and they can make very simple answers, that helps them engage and it helps them start going down that path to conversion quickly. Exactly. Typeform's a great one. Okay, so here is a starter media plan. So, of course, you could focus all your budget on one platform. I like to use across both and then see what's working best. And then I double down on and scale what's working. Ultimately, the best strategy typically goes across the two platforms. Like you're using Meta, like I mentioned, to generate the interest and you're making sure you capture when they search in Google the name. But about $500 to $1,000 is probably all you need to start. Of course, you can grow this. What's called impression share will let you know exactly how much you can grow it. If it's working, you can increase your budget. So on Meta, I would typically say to start with one platform at a time. Don't try launching both at once because they operate very differently. They have very different evaluation and platforms that you're looking at. And if you're trying to solve two things at once, you're probably not going to solve either. So typically launch with one and then layer on the other. So if you start with Meta as an example, then you're focused on creative. You're focused on that hook, getting better at creating ads. And then when you figure out, oh, this is how I bring someone to my landing page and convert them, then maybe you can launch Google and say, okay, now I want to see if I can convert someone who's searching for our product already. And this is a different mindset, right? So between $500 to $1,000 a month on each platform and then scale up what works. So your action plan. First thing you're going to do is you are going to figure out what is a member worth to you. Now, you might have different definitions. Like a membership, for example, is typically calculated on monthly rate times the length of term. You might do what's a camp sign up worth to me? What is a drop-in booking worth to me? Don't think about the one single session. Think about the person and if you can convince them to become a customer, whether it's just coming once a month or whether it's a membership, right? Think about what they're worth to you. Then I would say define your top, let's even just say top two. Who are the top two profiles that you want to go after? Jot down notes. What do you think they like? What do they like about your club? What specifically are they trying to achieve and what's been successful from your organic and just what you've been seeing by running your club for a couple of years, or if it's just going off the ground. But who are your best fit new members? Win your winners first and pick one of those, and you're going to create an ad specifically for that audience, not for any other audience. You're going to create an ad for that top performing audience. Install tracking. So we're going to go to Google Ads, Meta Ads, and GA4. If you have them set up already, I hope you already have a pixel going. If you don't, then you can install this through either Google Tag Manager on your site. We'll include some documentation that actually shows a little bit of this, kind of technical to go into here, but make sure you have those audiences being captured today. Try building one landing page. And as you saw from some of my earlier examples, they don't have to be, a designer's Pinterest board. This can be simple copy with a simple image that allows you to try to capture a lead, but create a standalone page. Then you're going to, I actually mentioned build your first set of ads. So this is where you're going to say, okay, I have that ICP that I built. I'm targeting parents with kids who want to join camps. That's who I'm going after. I'm going to create my first set of ads that are catered towards that audience, and then launch one of the platforms, either Google or Meta. You're going to launch that and you're going to add those ads in there. You can either work with a contractor, you can do it yourself. There's lots of different variations to this. But at the end of the day, spending about $20 to $30 a day with that first ad set, going to that first landing page is your step. All right, I've got some time for Q&A. 5 minutes exactly. I think we're all right, Joe.
You nailed it. I know we moved through the last slides pretty quickly. There's a couple of questions that came in. One, I think it would be helpful to understand when you're looking at the budgets slide that you shared. Do you mind actually going back to that so we can reference it? I think it would be helpful to frame this up. Were you thinking about this from a single location? Like as an example, we got a question from Josh is, around the recommended starting budget? Like, is this for a single club? And then how should facilities that have multiple locations in multiple geographies be thinking about building budget and applying this kind of general strategy?
Great point. So this is catered towards just like a single location kind of business. Typical rule of thumb is both Google and Meta, they actually don't need specific numbers and budgets to optimize towards what your goals might be. They need conversions. So the typical rule of thumb is your daily budget should be 2 to 3 times your cost per lead. So if you're getting leads at $10 a lead, then you should have a budget about $30 per day so that you can properly train Google and Meta. They both work differently, but at the same format, how to find those. So a good rule of thumb is actually don't worry about it on a per location basis. Worry about it on training Google to go find customers or training Meta to find customers, and making sure that if you're doing like I want to drive conversions, you're setting your budget that way. 3 to 1's a rough one.
Awesome. Is that helpful? Josh, drop a note if you have any follow-up questions, and anyone else if you want us to go in a little bit deeper about that. One other question that came through from Annie. Could you do us a favor and just break down pixels and what they are?
Yes, absolutely. A pixel is basically a cookie tracker. Whenever you've probably had this experience where you've gone to a website and you've left, and all of a sudden you're seeing an ad for that site, and you're like, I was just browsing running shoes yesterday, and now Nike's sending me a buy these shoes ad. They know that, and they can see what shoe you have. So pixels capture certain details, what audience, who is actually on the page, your IP address, all these different elements. And then it says, okay, now you can target them on a later period, typically a 30-day window, but you could have pixels that last 90 days, pixels that last 180 days. But essentially, it's a cookie in your phone or your browser that allows marketers to target that person again. And GA4's pixel is different than Meta's pixel. Every pixel is typically owned by the platform. So Google uses a certain pixel. So any of your Google audiences need to have a Google pixel. And Meta uses a certain pixel. So it's important to have both if you're going to launch on both.
Yeah. And I think as a general rule of thumb, if you're pre-launch right now and you're thinking, I need to build a website, et cetera, the faster that you can get your pixels on site, the better, because you're going to basically build you'll just have a smarter data set. So as an example, if you've got a 12-week lead time to when you're opening even a new facility, if you're like an enterprise club, you want to be gathering as much data as possible in advance of going live. And the same could be said even around organic strategy, right? It's like if you're driving interest, you want to capture data. You could also on that same page be capturing leads, right? Get on a waiting list to learn more about when we're launching, all of that good stuff.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Great. 2 marketers getting along.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, we have one question from Timofey. I hope I'm saying that right. How often would you recommend sending advertising updates to members about activities and club events? Oh, that's actually a great question. I would almost look at this in 2 ways, like organic communication and then advertising strategy. Ben, maybe you want to take on the paid media and I can address, the second part of that.
Yeah, as much as it's effective. When on the advertising side, you could get into a realistic rhythm, maybe think about it either monthly or quarterly. You're going to do at least quarterly updates. Typically, you'll have like an evergreen offer, something that's on all the time. You're not necessarily updating all the time. It's just consistently running. And then you'll add seasonal or other elements, which you could do, I'd say once per quarter is probably fine for starters. Of course, doing it monthly is probably even better. So if you get to that level, then you can start updating monthly too.
Yeah, that's great. And then my general rule of thumb, I used to be so cautious about timely communication and not bombarding people. But the reality is we are in this crazy attention economy and you are competing with the news of the day, which is bleak. We won't get into that, but you are competing with everything else on the internet. So I think a general rule of thumb there for posting, follow-up cadences through email and SMS, assume that people are not engaging with your content and be persistent. So I think the easiest way to do that is just more is more. And when you're thinking about your club communication strategy, so as an example, if you're using Playbypoint's marketing tools, you're going to want to send out, an email in advance, inviting someone to an event or a program. You're going to want to send out a follow-up later. You can set an SMS. There's all kinds of different touches and systems that you can build to support that follow-up cadence and sequencing. But I think the general rule there is like you are really competing for people's attention. So be strategic, of course, in how you do it. But generally, I think you want to try to catch them at relevant as a time as possible when you're doing follow-ups, as an example. I hope that's helpful. I'm also mindful that we've run over by 10 minutes, but these questions are great. For a sport like padel that's growing, but we find that 95% have never heard of it before, what type of ad do you think is best, knowing that most people will have no idea what sport this is when they see an ad? That's a tough creative question.
That's a
I feel like
good one,
we could do a whole webinar on creative strategy.
Quick tip, though, I would
So
say, is you could lead into that. It's not known. You could have target an adjacent industry and say, pickleball player who's curious what this whole paddle thing's about. There's your intro. Like, then you can go into like, we have a whole thing where all you picklers will figure out how paddle really works, and you can make it funny about that. But I like to lean into those kind of things.
yeah, I think to build on that, to answer the question, is there's many different angles that you can take. I think my rule of thumb is you either need to be entertaining or educating. Ideally, you're doing both at the same time. So it's like perhaps you're thinking about a reel series or, a video series on like, what is paddle? Great. Here's a little bit more about the sport. What are the rules of the game? How does that, like, how does our facility support paddle play? Like, you can tie in things around the venue, talking about the equipment, getting your pros involved. That's a great lead gen opportunity too through Book a Pro. It's like, if you're going to start somewhere, book a direct session with one of our head pros. So there's lots of angles you could take there. And I totally agree. I think education is paramount, especially right now, since people are really trying to understand, like, what is this paddle thing? It does seem a bit daunting to a lot of folks because they're like, okay, it has 4 walls. Am I going to get the strategy? But ultimately, if it's the right fit for them, people come in and they have a great time. And that's ultimately the goal, is to get more people on court having a great time. Cool. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. But we are always here to answer questions. So I'd say if something, if we jump from here and something comes up and, you want to reach out or you have a follow-up question, we're of course happy to chat, both Ben and myself. So I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your very busy day and joining us today. If you want to reach out to Ben, this is obviously something that he does full time, and he's a great strategist, and I've worked with him many, many years. Feel free to reach out and connect with him on LinkedIn. And of course, if you want to chat with us about anything related to how we can support you, whether it's adopting Book a Pro, Game Match, some of our other features, and trying to figure out how to tie this to a paid media strategy, our support team is never further than a WhatsApp, an email, a phone booking, or a live chat away. So thank you so much for joining today. Really, really appreciate it. If you have feedback, also, feedback's a gift. So let us know what else we can do. In our minds, this is just one more tool that we can help and provide you with to grow a successful and thriving business. So all to say, thank you so much for your time. I hope you all have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.